Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video.
Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing Aurelia, the Law Above. So when I first saw this spoiled with the new Murders of Karlov Manor spoilers, I thought, okay, please, before even reading anything, please don't be another Boros equipment or Aura commander. And they did deliver. I mean, it is going into that aggressive type of strategy that Boros normally fits into. But this does have some different nuances, and I do like that for it. So first, let's read what Aurelia, the Law Above does. So for 3 red and a white, we have a legendary creature Angel, and it does have flying, vigilance, and haste. I do like that mainly because it has that ability to essentially swing in for combat damage, and you can stay back to block some other people that are trying to attack you with that vigilance ability. Also, it does have 2 other sorts of abilities. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. Whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, she deals 3 damage to each of your opponents, and you gain 3 life. So at first when I did read this, I thought, okay, we're going to go with a Boros go wide strategy so that we could get the first and second trigger, but what I didn't realize is whenever a player attacks, so any of your opponents attack, you can get 1 or 2 of those triggers going on where you can draw cards, deal some damage, and gain some life. And so I thought that was very interesting, especially knowing Boros. You're wanting to attack, and of course this is going to be an aggressive deck where you want to be attacking with a lot of different creatures. Aside from that, what I do like about this, it's pretty original and unique, and it's going to give you a good amount of card advantage, especially if all your opponents are going to be swinging at everybody, for example, with 3 or more creatures. You're going to be getting a draw card per turn, so you're probably going to get like 4 card draw in one cycle, starting with you all the way to your last opponent before your turn. And so I do like that ability for Aurelia. Of course, that does require your opponents to have 3 or more creatures they're swinging with, and so that's one stipulation obviously you need to focus on. And so in this video, I wanted to focus on a couple different themes. The main big theme I did want to discuss with you is Boros card draw, kind of donating a lot of different creatures to your opponents so that you can get those combat triggers so that you can definitely get some card draw and deal some damage and gain some life. And speaking of which, I want to talk about goading your opponent's creatures because, of course, you don't want them attacking you. You want them to be attacking other opponents. And so kind of like a mix between goad and also a pillow fort strategy is what I kind of put into this deck, and I'll be explaining it a little bit later. And of course, while everybody's going against each other, you could focus on attacking everybody without the repercussion of everybody attacking you. So of course, we are going to go in a go wide strategy so that we can get that trigger ourselves, and also want to focus again on giving goad to a lot of our opponent's creatures so that they have to attack so that we can get that trigger no matter what. So of course, this is what makes Aurelia, the Law Above, so interesting, is the fact that you're going into a lot of different themes that are unexplored in Boros, and so let's get right into it. So of course, we are an aggressive theme. We want to focus on a lot of aggressive creatures so that we could draw a lot of cards. So first of all, let's focus on some creatures like Mary, Esquire of Rohan. So for red and a white, it does have haste, and it does have first strike as long as it's equipped, but we're really not worrying about that. We're really worrying about the second ability. Whenever you attack with Mary and another legendary creature, you draw a card. So if we do have another creature, Mary, and also Aurelia on the battlefield, we could swing in, draw 2 cards because of Mary and also because of Aurelia. So I feel like this is a pretty good option, just again to get some extra card draw, not only relying on Aurelia, but also relying on some other creatures that potentially can get us some card draw. Some similar cards to Mary are cards like Chivalric Alliance and Fireman Commando. Each of these have that ability. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, you draw a card. I will say I do really like Chivalric Alliance, mainly because it has the ability to pay 2, discard a card, and create a 2/2 white and blue 9 creature token with vigilance. Especially if you are in the late game and you're drawing a bunch of lands, you can just discard those lands so that you can make tokens on the battlefield so that you can swing in with Aurelia and draw some more cards. I will say something negative about Fireman Commando is the fact that it could potentially give your opponents card draw as long as they don't attack you, but that's kind of going into that pillow fort like strategy. They're giving benefits to your opponents when they attack each other instead of you, so this is just one way to do so. Obviously, you're getting card draw off of this, so I feel like this is a great include nonetheless. I did also want to point out another card draw outlet with Mangara the Diplomat. So this is a very good and interesting card because whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you or planeswalker you control, you draw a card. So again, this is kind of going towards that incentivizing, hey, don't attack me, attack your other opponents, or else I will get the advantage. Also, whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. So I feel like in a general sense, a lot of people may be casting a lot more spells than 1 spell each turn. So I feel like, again, you're going to get some good card draw out of Mangara, so I feel like, again, this is another great include to add to the list for extra card draw support. But of course, we want to be drawing cards and dealing damage to our opponents by donating creatures to our opponents. So the first card I did think about was pretty recent with the Eldraine set with Oxdrover. Honestly, this is a pretty fun card. It does have Vigilance and a 4/4 being a 4-mana card, and so that's pretty good stats by itself, and it can't be blocked by Oxen, so I feel like that's a pretty fun, flavorful win, because obviously you're going to be donating 2 4-white Oxen creature tokens to your opponents. This also does happen when you enter the battlefield with Oxdrover, and when you do attack, you give those Oxen to your opponent, and then you draw a card. So again, the idea of this is to make sure that we give our opponents a lot of different creatures, like the Oxen, that they're not really going to kill our Oxdrover. We're going to get the benefit out of it by drawing cards, and then our opponents are going to get creatures that they can swing in with each other. Another similar card I do want to point out is Life of the Party. So this is a pretty interesting one because it has First Strike, Trample, and Haste, and when it does attack, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So of course, we do have a lot of creatures on the battlefield, so this is going to be very good so that we can swing in for a lot of damage. Not only that, but when it enters the battlefield, if it's not a token, each opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. The token is goaded for the rest of the game. So again, that's diving into the strategy of donating cards to our opponents so that they have to swing in with their creatures. And this will be one great way to do so. Obviously, the more cards they do have on the battlefield that are creatures, the bigger threat this will become. However, I did want to move on. I did want to talk about Combat Calligrapher. So for 3 and a white, it does have flying, and also ink creatures can attack you or planeswalkers you control. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, that attacking player creates a tapped 2/1 white and black ink creature token with flying that's attacking that opponent too. So again, this is another way you can go into that donate theme so that you can get some card draw, deal some damage, and gain some life. So obviously I did want to include this as well so that we could get to that ability with Aurelia. I will say though, this could potentially bite you in the butt, mainly because if somebody destroys Combat Calligrapher and they have a lot of Inklings on the battlefield, you no longer have protection from those Inklings and they could attack you right then and there. So with that, try to proceed with caution with that, but if you do want to make sure that your opponents aren't attacking you, you could go into a goad and pillow fort strategy. So with this, you really want to incentivize your opponents to attack each other instead of you. So ways you could do that is by using cards like Curse of Opulence and Norn's Decree. So with Curse of Opulence, you could obviously enchant a player that's probably the most ahead, and then people could keep on swinging at them so that they could get gold tokens. That does include yourself too. And of course, with Norn's Decree, nobody really wants to attack into you because they will get a poison counter, and when that player does have a poison counter, people will be incentivized to attack them so that they could draw a card. So again, this is just kind of building your pillow fort little by little so your opponents don't attack you, they attack each other. Another way they could do so is by using Ghostly Prison. This is obviously one of the more popular pillow fort type strategy cards. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 mana for each creature they control that's attacking you. So for obvious reasons, this had to be included too. However, another fun one I did want to mention is actually Elesh Norn, and on the backside with the Argent Etchings. So again, the main reason why I do like this is because it kind of acts like a pillow fort type strategy with that front side and could be a win con on the backside. So of course, she does have that ability whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, or a permanent you control, that source controller loses 2 life unless they pay 1 mana. So of course, that's any type of damage, whether your opponent's lightning bolting you to the face, or if they're dealing a lot of damage with creatures, they do have to pay 1 or they lose 2 life instead. Plus, if you do flip her, she turns into the Argent Etchings. This has that ability to incubate 5 times, then transform all incubator tokens you control. Then on that second lore chapter, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain double strike until end of turn. Then later on, you can destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians, and you flip it back to Elesh Norn. So of course, if you don't win by that second lore chapter by giving your creatures double strike and giving them +1/+1, and of course you do have a lot of creatures on the battlefield, so I do feel like you're going to be winning the game there. You can kind of reset the board and then restart the process with Elesh Norn later on. So I do feel like this is probably going to be one of the best cards you can be playing in this deck, so of course I did have to include it. So of course there's the pillow fort strategy, but I did also want to talk about the goad strategy. So some goad cards I did want to mention
mention is Death Kiss and Komeanu Battle Armor. So Death's Kiss will incentivize your opponents to attack each other so that they could double their power of their creatures when they do attack each other, and plus when you make it monstrous, you goad up to X target creatures your opponents control. So of course when you goad your opponent's creatures, they will double their power until end of turn when they do attack your opponents, so that's obviously going to be a great include there. Plus with the Battle Armor, what I do like about it is when you deal combat damage to a player, you goad each creature that players control. So you could either swing in with it, or you could also equip it to Aurelia so you can give her +2/+2 and Menace, so that then you can swing it in the air so that you could definitely for sure goad all your opponent's creatures. So those are great options. Another great option I did want to mention is Spectacular Showdown. So for 2 mana, put a double strike counter on target creature, then goad each creature that had a double strike counter put on this way. Also, it does have that overload ability for 4 and triple red. So of course, giving double strike to all your opponent's creatures, especially if the board's really heavy, is pretty insane. On top of that, if you do overload it, you will also put double strike counters on your own creatures too, so that you can swing away, give that double strike damage too. So with that said, of course you want to develop your army while your opponents are attacking each other. So ways you could do that is by making tokens of creatures. For example, Charismatic Conqueror is excellent for 1 and a white. It has vigilance. Whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped under your opponent's control, they may tap that creature. If they don't, you create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So I'll tell you what, this is absolutely efficient. For 2 mana, it does have vigilance and it's a 2/2, but it also has that ability to produce extra tokens if they don't want to tap their artifact or creature that entered the battlefield. Plus with 3 other opponents on the battlefield, obviously I feel like you're going to get a lot of advantage out of this, because a lot of people may not want to tap their artifacts or creatures when they enter the battlefield. They might have haste, or they want to tap that mana right away if it's a artifact that taps for mana. So of course I do feel like this is going to flood the battlefield with a bunch of vampires, and that's why I wanted to mention this one pretty quickly. And of course you also do want some token makers like Adeline Resplendent Cathar and also Anim Pakal. Of course with Adeline, its power is based off of the number of creatures you control, so that's excellent by itself. And also whenever you do attack, for each opponent create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or planeswalker you control. So basically when you swing in with this, you're going to be making 3 tokens. So yeah, you're going to be making a board state quickly. But with Anim Pakal, it does have that ability whenever you attack with 1 or more non-gnome creatures, put a 1/1 counter on Anim Pakal, then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Anim Pakal. So this is more of like a snowball effect. The more counters you do put on this, the bigger it will become, and the more artifact creatures you could have putting on the battlefield. So obviously these are 2 excellent includes. Another great include I would mention is Hero Bladehold. So of course if we do have a lot of creatures on the battlefield, that battle cry ability will be extra deadly. Whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Also, whenever a Hero Bladehold attacks, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. So of course with this is excellent, mainly because we want to make sure we get those triggers with Aurelia, and the more tokens we do have on the battlefield, the more we could get to that first ability and also that second ability of dealing damage and gaining life. But the next one I do want to talk about is pretty spicy, and of course that's Riders of the Mark. So this one's a very interesting one for 6 and a red. The spell will cost 1 less to cast for each human you control. So what I do like about this is essentially it could be reduced to just 1 red mana if you do have 6 humans on the battlefield for just a 7/4. So that by itself is pretty excellent. What else does it do? It does have trample and haste, and at the beginning of your end step, if Riders of the Mark attack this turn, return it to its owner's hand. If you do, you create a number of 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens on the battlefield equal to its toughness. So on the fortunate side, you do have to put this to your hand, but upside, you do make 4 creatures on the battlefield. So next time when you do want to cast this, instead of this costing 7 mana, it'll just cost 3 mana, and then of course, if you do have more humans on the battlefield, this should just potentially cost 1 red mana. So obviously, this is a very good include, just having a lot of creatures on the battlefield and 1 big aggressive threat. Also, of course, we do want to win the Aurelia way. So for example, we do want to go into extra combats with Aurelia the War Leader and also Response and Resurgence. So of course with Aurelia the War Leader, it is pretty expensive being 6 mana and also crazy pips with 2 red and 2 white. It does have Flying Vigilance and Haste, and whenever she does attack for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Depending on how much creatures you are attacking with, you can draw a card and also deal 3 damage to each opponent and gain 3 life, and then you can repeat that process by getting an extra combat phase. The same thing can be said for Response and Resurgence. Response is a good like early game if somebody is attacking you, you can deal 5 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. But of course in this deck you really want to be using that second ability with Resurgence. Giving your creatures First Strike and Vigilance and getting an extra combat phase is excellent. Of course there are some extra combat cards in the deck. You can check out the deck list down below in the description so that you can see what kind of cards I added into the deck. However, with that said, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video about Aurelia the Law Above. I feel like this is going to be a very interesting commander, and to be quite honest, one of the best Boros commanders I've seen in a while, and that's not really saying much because, again, I feel like there's not a lot of great Boros commanders. I mean, again, there are some, but I feel like this could be very powerful because, of course, you're drawing cards off your opponents attacking each other, and obviously if they attack you, you could draw cards. Also, gaining that 3 life is pretty good too, and dealing 3 damage to your opponents is excellent. Again, this is a very unique take on Boros. I mean, the idea of having a pillow fort strategy, I mean, of course you're going into that aggressive strategy, but you want to make sure you're goading your opponent's creatures so they don't attack you, they attack each other. And while they're doing all that, you can get the advantage of card draw and dealing 3 damage to your opponents and gaining life. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Aurelia the Law Above? Again, I feel like this is a very interesting Boros commander. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.